Hi. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session. We're so excited to have everyone here and want to welcome you to Indigenous Women Rise Society. And our training today is called Dating Safe, and it's a train the trainer session. We're so excited to have partnership with the YWCA, and we have Ryan here, and we have John Ann here from the YWCA, and she'll be answering, or she'll be taking care of the questions that you might have. So if you have any questions as they come up, you can put them in the chat, or you can send a message directly to John Ann questions, and she can list them off for Ryan a little bit later on in the program. So first off, I want to acknowledge the territory that I'm on. I'm on Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. I'm so honored to be living, working, and playing here on this unceded territory that the people have lived here for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And so thankful for that, and for all of the people that are um, that are from those nations, and hopefully we have some people from those nations joining us tonight. Um, Indigenous Women Rise has just celebrated our first year, and we're very excited to be offering this Train the Trainer. We had over 800 people register for this, so we're hoping to get a large turnout tonight. We just have over almost 300 people joining us online right now. So the hope and the dream was that we'd have people trained on how to use the resources that the YWCA has around dating safe, and that once you learn how to use the resources or see what the resources are, then you can have a program happening in your community, wherever you live. And it can be in person, or it can be on Zoom like we're doing now tonight, because there's such a need for this type of information to be delivered to our people, and very thankful to have this opportunity to do so. So I'm going to introduce Ryan to you, who's going to take it away, because we have a very jam-packed day, or couple of hours for you. So really want to give that time to Ryan and Joanne. And I want to acknowledge Margot Sidline, who's our program support here, and she's going to be the Zoom host. So we'll have some opportunity to have a couple breakout sessions where you can be put into smaller groups, and you'll be able to chat with one another. So thank you so much for your patience and your understanding, and look forward to hearing more from Ryan. Thank you so much. Now go. Take it away, Ryan.
Thank you, Diana. Hi, everybody. It's really nice to be here with you in this virtual space. It is a lot of people. It's probably more than I've ever spoken to before. So bear with me if I'm a little nervous. It is exciting, and I'm really grateful that I get to be here. I'm really grateful to Diana for inviting me. Diana and I met this summer at the Elders Conference here in Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories. And we were invited to share a bit of our Dating Safe program at that conference. And it was kind of a funny introduction, I think, to the program for some people, because the outside of the room that we were put into just labeled our talk as dating safe. And I think a lot of the elders that were coming by thought that it was dating safe advice for elders. And so it wasn't very clear that it was us sharing a program about the youth work that we do in schools. And so it was kind of a funny interaction for some of the folks coming in the room, and were looking for dating advice for themselves. And so it spurred this good conversation, though, about the need for this work with youth, and to have these conversations about how we have healthy relationships. And so I had really great conversations with some folks at that conference, and it's great that some connections were built where now we can work with some communities and we can share more of our information with you. So I'm going to talk tonight about our program. It's called Dating Safe. I'm going to kind of walk you through how our program developed, some of the background that we've done to kind of build the program and the curriculum, how we're accountable to certain communities, and how we've kind of done the work. And then I'm going to show you the curriculum and walk us through module by module what the curriculum entails. The curriculum is online for free. It's fully accessible. If you haven't seen it yet or been linked to it, we're actually going to send a document out after the presentation today that's going to have some resources on it for you, including the link for the curriculum. So it's all free and accessible, and everything I'm doing today is directly in that curriculum. I'm just going to kind of show you more so how we do it, kind of the philosophy behind holding space in this way for young people, and how the activities take place in person. So I'm going to explain more in detail how you set up certain activities and how the conversations take place in some of the activities. And then we're going to give you space, like Diana said, to have a bit of a breakout session where you can have more conversations in smaller groups about how these lessons that I'm talking about could apply for your communities. What we do is for all genders and it's in school. So I work in high schools. I don't work specifically with Indigenous communities or Indigenous youth specifically. So I think the interesting part that will come out of this session, maybe you can hear my cat saying hello. My cat likes to say hi, so one of one of my roommates here is trying to say hello. But yeah, I think the interesting thing that will come out today is how you'll take what we're trying to do in schools and apply it specifically for your communities and how you can add cultural lenses to it and specific dynamics that would fit your situation, excuse me, your situations. So, with all that to say, I'm going to kind of introduce myself a little bit more and explain a little bit about myself so you can kind of understand where I'm coming from and what my experiences have been like to lead me into this work. And hopefully you feel kind of comfortable with me holding this space. And again, I'm really grateful just to be welcomed into this work and to be able to do this with all of you. I was born on the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe. I spent most of my childhood out in so-called Southwestern Ontario. I grew up in a place so-called London, Ontario, near Oneida Nation and Chippewa of the Thames. And that's kind of where I spent a lot of my childhood. And I grew up in a settler family. My parents are European settlers. My dad's side of the family is Sicilian and English. So my grandfather on my dad's side is where the last name Avola comes from, and Avola is a Sicilian name. And my middle name Sword is my mom's maiden name, and that comes from Scotland. And the sword lineage can be traced back to the northern people of Scotland. From the best I know, it's related to the Pictish people. So that's kind of part of my work is tracing some of my ancestry and trying to be accountable to some of my ancestral knowledge that's been lost as my family's moved to Turtle Island and became settlers here. And I grew up in a pretty privileged situation in a pretty safe household. And a lot of my journey was kind of unlearning some of that. And a lot of that started to take place in university when I studied social justice and peace studies and started to kind of learn about the colonization that had happened on the land that I was living on and what my responsibility was to the indigenous people where I was living. And I started to get involved in social movements and political movements in my community. And that kind of led me also to do gender-based work and started to kind of show me the ways that being assigned male at birth and being in relationships, like dating relationships with women, was creating kind of dynamics in my life that I needed to be accountable to. And so I started to get involved in dating or a healthy relationship education, specifically with boys and men. And I had some very impactful mentors at the time that kind of guided me into that space. Um, so flash forward a bit, I end up moving out west and I find myself on the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories and learning a lot from the indigenous nations here about being in good relationship with this land as I was seeking a place of healing and kind of understanding some of my childhood dynamics and how I wanted to be in good relationships here. And so I started working in schools and running relationship-based education programs specifically with boys. And I ended up working for an organization called Dudes Club. Dudes Club, you maybe some of you have heard of. They're an Indigenous-led men's health organization out here that started in the downtown east side in Vancouver. And we helped kind of together build a youth program that focused specifically on healthy masculinities for Indigenous boys and trying to support boys in connecting to cultural ways of healing. And just that work has really inspired me and got me closer to community members that have, shown me good ways of being in community and trying to hold space and build my facilitation skills. And so I've ended up working now for the YWCA for the past 5 years and helping facilitate this program called Dating Safe. And Dating Safe is for grade eights specifically. So as we talk today, just think about the context. A lot of our program has been developed for 12-year-olds, 12 to 13-year-olds. And then we do booster modules. So I return to the schools and see them in grade 9 and grade 10 as kind of 14 and 15-year-olds. And that's the kind of space that I've been working in for the last little bit. So I'm really grateful to be able to do this work. I'm really grateful to the Tsleil-Waututh, the Musqueam, the Squamish Nations for hosting me here and for being a guest on these lands and having good relationships with some host people that have shown me ways of holding space and have taught me a lot about relationship-based education. And so I want to bring that with me, and I want to kind of honor those lessons, but also kind of acknowledge that I'm doing this from a place as a settler. And a lot of times my work is working with other non-Indigenous people to think about what it means to hold space, to kind of decolonize our ways of being in education spaces or being facilitators. So I think you're going to bring your own lens and your own approach, maybe as Indigenous people, in a way that I wouldn't. And so just keep in mind that sometimes the context I'm speaking in is working in schools and working specifically as a non-Indigenous person. And that kind of framework has shaped how the program works. And I want to kind of see how our discussions build and how you can share maybe together how you would apply this kind of knowledge to your own situations in your own communities. So Dating Safe is a 5-year project that we're just wrapping up and moving into a next stage. It's been funded by the Public Health Agency of Canada, and we work in a community of practice with 20 other organizations across the country, including Indigenous organizations that work specifically on reserve and in Indigenous communities with Indigenous youth. And in this community practice, we've shared research together and we've shared curriculum, and we meet periodically to kind of bounce ideas off each other, share best practices, share challenges with each other. And that's been a really vital space to all of our learning and how we build research together. So we do research with the youth that we work with, and we get feedback from them, and we adapt their feedback into the program every year, including the feedback that's coming from the other communities of practice across the country. Some are in schools, some are in communities, some are in community centers, some are with specific gender groups, some are with specific language groups. So there's quite a diversity of communities that build this work together. Um, as I was brought into the work here, we had to do our own kind of adapting and accountability work within our curriculum. Our curriculum was first written by two white curriculum writers, two non-Indigenous, two settler curriculum writers. And as we start to investigate our biases and the ways that our program is maybe not reflective of everybody, we've done consulting work and brought in other knowledge keepers and expertise to look over our curriculum and work with us to kind of adapt ways that it could be more inclusive for Indigenous youth in schools, as well as Black youth, as well as communities of color, different immigrant groups or different language speakers, to make sure that our program is kind of reflective of as many people as we can, and find ways that maybe we haven't always been inclusive and we could always grow and build a better program. So that's part of the work that we've done in the last 5 years. Um, our program also existed during COVID, in the middle of COVID. So we had to shift from being in school to being online. And you can kind of see this, what I'm using today is called Prezi. If you haven't heard of Prezi before, you can, I can talk more about boys. I see a little question about boys and men's club. I can share more about that. And there's going to be a specific way that I'm going to speak about how maybe boys show up in the classes that I talk about a little bit later. But Prezi is this presentation program I'm using. I find it really useful. It's what I used when we shift all of our programs online. It's a little bit more dynamic than just a slideshow. But I will say too, doing relationship-based education, holding a space where we talk about healthy relationships, being online is just not as I do, yes. So I'm trying to keep track of also questions. I have an undergraduate degree in social justice and peace studies. and I have a master's degree in globalization and the human condition. So kind of like an interdisciplinary political science degree. And I've been facilitating for 10 years, mostly in schools and in communities. I'm currently co-facilitating in the men's group also at UBC that's supported by the Sexual Assault Support Center, and I've been doing that work for the last 5 years. So just trying to give you a bit of, yeah, context of who I am and why I do this. So yeah, all this to say, I really believe that this work is important to do in person, and there's a way of doing it online, but um, the real, strength of having a relationship-based education, a space to talk about healthy relationships, comes from being in relationship with each other and being in a circle and sitting in a space where you can share and talk. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our guiding principles because I think that's kind of going to give you a sense of how we hold space. So it's really important that when we go into schools, we talk about how settler colonialism has shaped the whole school system and how there's a power dynamics that's at play in the school. This creates a system that the students are feeling and experiencing, and especially for racialized students that are experiencing racism, sometimes from teachers or from textbooks. Coming in and speaking about healthy relationships is not just talking about dating. It's unpacking all of the ways that actually violent systems around us have enforced kind of ways of being in harmful relationships together. So this is a starting point that we have to address, and we have to talk about the ways that these systems are showing up in real time in our spaces. So I talk a little bit at the start of our programs about land acknowledgements and territorial acknowledgements. I encourage students to reflect on where they're from and their families or how they've maybe landed in these spaces and on this land, and how we build healthy relationships together. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that more when I show you the curriculum. Creating a space also for all genders. If you're doing a gender specific space, this is maybe a little different for you, but I'm working in schools with all genders. And if we are talking about romantic relationships, it's important that we're inclusive, that some students are in queer relationships or same gender relationships or are questioning their gender identities and not coming in with reinforcing gender stereotypes that are putting people into boxes that is making them not really comfortable learning the material anyway. So these are some of the basic kind of frameworks that we're trying to set up just from the start and trying to make sure people feel safe enough just to be in the space. This includes accessibility. For me, that's a lot around language. I work in schools where sometimes students don't speak English as their first language. This also includes people that maybe are hard of hearing or have hearing disabilities or sight disabilities that we need to adapt for. And so we're thinking a lot about how activities can be accessible for everyone if we're going to play a game, but not everyone can actually play the game. Then we need to rethink about how the game could be set up so that everyone has a role to play and someone can feel included in it. Um, I work in the phys ed department. So when I go into schools, I'm actually doing health classes as part of phys ed. And I think there's a way of shaping what we do as healthy relationships as connected to physical health. And this is maybe a take that you put on it too, that having unhealthy relationships and experiencing relationship violence is directly impacting our physical health. Our physical health is also our mental health. Our mental health is our spiritual health. There's this kind of, interconnected way that health shows up. And so I think it gets youth a little bit more to buy into this idea that relationship skills is not just something that seems maybe not related to them if they're not interested in dating or they're not interested in romantic relationships. There's still a way that we can inspect our relationships as a way of addressing our health and thinking about what it means to be healthy, and even our relationship to ourselves as maybe our most important relationship. So um, all this to say, the facilitator plays a very important role in doing this and upholding the kind of respect in the space. Um, that means for me, not making students feel forced to participate, not students feel like they're there and they have to do something they're not comfortable with. I try and create a space where students feel like they can leave if they need to take a bathroom break, if they need to eat something. So we're talking about what they need to be able to even access the space. I think a lot of that has to do with the facilitator setting up an environment that feels like the students can even, show up as themselves there. And so it takes role modeling vulnerability, role modeling your own emotions. There's times I get frustrated with students. I have to, name what I'm feeling and talk about what I'm going through and say maybe I'm having a hard day, and respecting the students' autonomy. I think a lot of this is difficult within the school system. Some of my kind of philosophy comes from Paulo Freire. You've maybe heard of him. He's a Brazilian educator that wrote about the pedagogy of the oppressed. And he did theater work around kind of what it means to rise up and challenge systems of power. He said education must begin with the solution of the teacher-student contradiction by reconciling the poles of contradiction so that both are simultaneously teachers and students. And so when I go into schools, I'm there to learn from the youth. I go in and don't necessarily present myself as an expert. I go in to say, you are the experts of your own lives. You are the experts of your own relationships. I have as much to learn from you as maybe you could learn from me. And we're here to share in the space and build dialogue and build discussion. And that creates, environment where students can kind of challenge the power dynamics that they maybe feel exist around them. And it puts us on more of an even level. And then we can kind of do that work, I think, in a better way. So some of the background work, the way that we've set up the program and how maybe I set up the space. I'm going to show you now the 8 modules that we've started with, their topics. I'm going to go into how they work and some of the main activities in them. So our first module is on introductions. We set up the space. We talk a little bit about what it means to be thinking about relationships. We do an activity to talk about healthy relationship skills just from the base point. Then we talk about power and stereotypes, communication skills, social media and consent culture, understanding dating violence, intoxication culture and consent, bystander intervention, and then we do a closing and a review session. A lot of this program too has been developed by young people through focus groups and through youth groups. We've interviewed people, students at UBC as well, and other youth workers to kind of get a sense of what the main topics should be in a program like this. So after a few years of delivery, we felt like 8 modules was kind of a barrier sometimes for schools, and it was kind of too long for students. So this year we've actually narrowed it down to 4 core modules, and we've collapsed some of the main topics together. So this year we've been running a program with 4 modules: an introduction to healthy relationships and power dynamics, and then stereotypes and communication skills, then understanding dating violence and boundaries, and then social media and bystander intervention. And I've been feeling like this is a better, more approachable system for young people. I think 8 was too many sessions. 4, I feel like it's a little bit condensed, and I only have one school block to deliver a module in. So it is, I feel like it's a little bit rushed. It could maybe be 5 modules or 6. But I think 4 is a good way to get this content delivered to students, and it feels like a little bit easier for them. So I'm going to show you though the 8 modules from the original curriculum. That's what's online. That's what you're going to have access to. And then you can kind of, how I'm doing also, pick and choose what works for you, what you think is the most important to include in maybe a condensed version, if that's something that would work for you. Okay. After I go through each of the modules, we're going to have a little breakout session and some time for you to kind of touch base with each other and have some discussion about how you think this content could be adapted to your own needs. Okay, I know I'm doing a lot of the talking. I normally do this in smaller groups where we can actually like play activities together and like do kind of interactive things. And with over 300 people, I think it's become a presentation. And it's not my preference. Again, it's one directional, and it's kind of like I'm broadcasting to you. And I really don't think it's the best way to learn or like be in a good relationship. But with the limitations, this is kind of what we're doing. So I'm talking a lot, but I hope it's interesting enough and you're staying engaged. So module 1, we do introductions. We kind of set the stage by also thinking about colonialism and how that has shaped even the school system and even schools being built on stolen land, how land theft and systems of colonialism like residential schools has contributed to a culture that is non-consensual, and how this kind of framework exists all around us in this kind of Western colonial society. And so what does it mean to challenge that and to work in the classroom or in your group to build healthy relationships as a way of actually challenging things like racism, things like settler colonialism? I introduced the idea that I've kind of learned from a lot of Indigenous people in my life about all my relations and this teaching. I kind of share through Lakota prayer and through an Ojibwe phrase of Mitakuye Oyasin. And I'm not sure if that's something that is accurate, but this from some research in the ways that I've been engaging with some Indigenous people about how thinking about what it means to be all in relationship together in that space and how we're all interconnected and how that we can challenge a system of power over where we can kind of think about how we honor each other's ancestor, we honor each other's backgrounds, we honor each other's journeys, and we show up in that space as with the responsibility of taking care of each other. So we kind of introduced that at the start of in our first introductions. I play a game called Step into the Middle. In my experience, youth love this game. We stand in a circle, we invite them to stand, and then you give them prompts. You say, step into the middle if, and then you say something. If what you're saying is true for them, they take one step in. If it's not true for them, they stay on the outside. If it's partially true, they would put one foot in and keep one foot out. And if it is true for them, but they don't want to step in, they can always just stay on the outside. So you always give them the option to opt out. But this game, step into the middle. So I could say things like step into the middle if you like gym class, step into the middle if you play a sport, step into the middle if you play an instrument, et cetera, et cetera. And we can build in things like step in the middle if you speak more than one language, or step into the middle if you were born in another territory or born in another country, or step into the middle if you've ever had a crush on somebody, step into the middle if you've been in a dating relationship. And so it gets us to kind of introduce each other without speaking as a form of using body language, which is pretty inviting for people that maybe, especially as grade eights, don't know each other that well. If you're doing this in a group where youth don't know each other that well, it can be a good way of introducing each other. Again, this step by step is all in the curriculum, so you can see kind of laid out specifically how that works. But I really like this game, and I find youth actually ask to play it often. So even in the third or fourth session, they'll want to do it again with new questions and new prompts. Then I go on to explain kind of safe space and brave space. I don't know if you've seen a kind of difference between these two things. Brave space is much less common, and we don't use that language that much. But if I ask students to put up their hand, if they've heard of the term safe space, almost all of them will put their hand up. And there's even signs in the school that say this is a safe space. But what this gets us to do is actually challenge the idea that the space is safe. Because maybe a youth is sitting across the circle from their bully, or maybe the youth has come to school and feels afraid and scared that day, and the school is not a safe space for them. So we get to say, you know what, maybe this isn't safe for you. So in order for us to talk about things like relationships, we also talk about unhealthy relationships. It can be overwhelming, it can be upsetting, it can bring up a lot of heavy feelings. So it takes some bravery, actually. It takes some courage to show up in this space. It takes some strength to be here and to share together. And maybe it's not necessarily safe yet. So we ask them then, you know, what would it mean to create a safe space? And so then they get to build this kind of community guideline, this community agreement together. What would it take for us to build a safe space together? And they can put their input in of, you know, respect or listening to each other, not putting people down, not calling people names. And then together we build that community agreements list, and we get to refer to that at the start of every session to say, you know, this is the guidelines that we've set, and that we have a responsibility to uphold these guidelines together. So then we go into accessibility needs. We make sure people have a chance to say, you know, maybe I need the lights turned down a bit, or I have ADHD, I need to stand up a lot, I need to move around a lot. So we go around the circle and everyone gets to say if they need anything in particular that would make it more accessible for them. And if you haven't done this before, it's important that everybody can say, my accessibility needs are being met currently. So maybe they have accessibility needs that are all being met, so they can say my accessibility needs are met. And that way, if students do want to say something, they can say, well, you know, I would appreciate sitting outside the circle. It just gives me, you know, the ability to listen or focus better, or whatever they might need. It is also a chance then where we have to say that if disclosures happen, so maybe as we have conversations in the class, students maybe want to share a story about something they've been through, and they maybe start to tell a story about a time that they've experienced violence from somebody. So in order to make sure that it's set up properly, so if a student feels like they want to say that, you've already said at the start during our introductions that, hey, look, I'm an adult, I'm a professional, I'm a teacher, I'm working. It's my responsibility legally to tell people if you tell me that you've experienced violence from somebody, if you're currently experiencing violence from a parent or from someone in your life, I'm legally responsible to have to report that. And I want you to know that, I would have to do that. But I want you to be in charge of that process. And I think this is a lesson that I've been taught from some people, some facilitators that I really trust, that the system of removing children from their families is a very racist system and can be very harmful for families. And so as a facilitator, I would say, if I think you're going to tell me a story that is telling me that you've experienced violence, I might interrupt you and just check in and make sure that you understand that a process will happen if you want to share that right now, and give them the option to maybe tell me in confidence after the program and discuss with them before they tell me what the process might be like and what is kind of what would happen if they're going to tell me certain things. And so this is a way of putting the power back in the students or back into the youth and putting it in their hands and saying, look, I don't want you to feel like automatically a process happens without your control and without your consent. So it's giving them the chance to decide on their own if they're ready to disclose that they're experiencing violence and they're ready for a process to happen. Instead of maybe in the moment feeling overwhelmed and feeling emotional and sharing something, and then automatically a process happening without their consent or without their agreements to it. So I think this is something that I've practiced now, and I think it's really important. I think it does come up where students might want to share and confide in you about violence they're experiencing. So I think it's important to set up a space where they feel like they can talk to you and trust you and know that you're not going to just report them like getting them in trouble or doing something that they actually haven't really agreed to happen yet. So I hope that kind of makes sense. I'm happy to talk about that more. Then I play a game called We All Have a Story. This is kind of like Pictionary and charades, kind of. No, it's more like Pictionary and telephone. So everybody gets a piece of paper. On their paper, they write a short story, like 2 sentences. It could be the soccer ball rolled down the street. Then we pass our pages to other people in the circle, and the next person draws a picture of the story. Then we fold the page so that the writing is covered and just a picture exists on the page. So it's like a little drawing of a soccer ball rolling down the street. And we pass that to somebody else. So now I get a page on it with a drawing on it. And I have to write a story of the drawing. So maybe I see a little soccer ball rolling down the street. And so I have to write a new story based on the picture. And we do that rounds a few times. And we end up with our page back, our original page. And we've seen that the story we wrote at the top has transformed into something else. And the new story at the bottom is probably something totally unrelated to my first story. And we get to talk about how we all have our own perspectives and we're entering into this space with our own lived experiences that shape our own realities and shape the way that we experience the world. And then we get to kind of have this takeaway lesson where in these classes, in this space, it's important that we make room for everybody's perspectives and that we're not always going to agree and we're not always going to see the same way and we're not always going to have the same lived experiences. And what I think is the right way may not be what someone else thinks is the right way. But the space is about having dialogue and a conversation where we can try and expand our perspectives and try and hold space for someone else's reality, even if it's maybe different than my own. And so every game or activity tries to have some kind of takeaway, some kind of lesson behind it. And so this is one that's really fun. It involves drawing and some art. And it also gets them thinking about how we interpret the stories, how we hear things and maybe interpret them different than somebody else would interpret it, and how our lived experiences shape our realities and how we even imagine or dream about things. And then we do scenarios, healthy, unhealthy, and unsure. I would say a scenario, and I would ask them to move to a side of the room that reflects how they feel. If they think the scenario is a healthy relationship or an unhealthy relationship, or if they're unsure about it. So they'd move to the left side of the room if they think it's healthy. They move to the right side of the room if they think it's unhealthy, or they move to the back of the room if they're unsure about it. So I'd say a scenario like, say there's a dating couple in high school, they're in a relationship with each other, and they have an agreement that they can check each other's phones and read each other's social media messages whenever they want. And so then the students move to the side of the room, decide if they think this is healthy, they think it's unhealthy. And this scenario specifically gets them very split. Some think this is a reflection of trust and a reflection of honesty, and they have nothing to hide. And they have an agreement. So who am I to say that it's unhealthy? They've agreed to it. Some think this is something they would never agree to. It means they don't trust each other, that it means that they need to spy on each other and they need to check up and they think that someone's cheating. So they have a dialogue and they have a discussion and they get to kind of debate it a little bit with each other of, oh, what would work for you and where are your boundaries in a situation like this? In the curriculum, you'll see a bunch of other scenarios that we use for this activity. And so you can ask these prompts, they can move to different sides of the room, and then you can ask people to share why they chose that side of the room. And they can kind of build a dialogue together. And you can remind them that we're here to build these ideas together and that we are going to have different ideas about what healthy means and what unhealthy means, and that we can learn a lot from each other by sharing, our own perspectives. And that I can't necessarily come into a room of students I don't know and say, this is healthy and this is unhealthy. This is healthy and this is unhealthy. A lot of that work is through relationship, through understanding, and through learning. And so the program is a lot about getting youth to reflect on their own boundaries, their own comfort levels, what they would agree to or not agree to in their relationships, and find a space where they can actually start to express that and share that. Okay, so now you kind of get a sense of how things work. The first 2 or 3 modules, I'm talking a little bit more in depth, and then the rest of the modules are actually going to go a lot quicker. So some of the main activities just happen in the first 3 modules, and I wanted to share them with you because maybe it'll give you a better way of actually practicing it if you try this in person. So power and stereotypes is a really hard module. I think it's super important in talking about relationships. Again, this program is not just about dating. And I think this is a big lesson for us, especially me in schools. A lot of young people in grade 8s don't want to date. They're not interested in dating. They're maybe from a cultural background where they don't speak about dating at home. They have like a limit on when they date. So it's not always relevant for me to say every conversation is about dating or romance. Actually, what we're doing is talking about healthy relationships in general. And at times we'll apply it to romance and at times we'll apply it to dating. But these lessons in here are about how do we actually just imagine what relationship means in general and how we have healthy relationships. So power and stereotypes, I think, is really important. So we talk again about kind of introducing the way that colonialism and racism has segregated a lot of us and treats some people unfairly and privileges and benefits others. And we play a game to illustrate that, as I call it the triangle of power. Okay, so I'm just going to show you actually before I go into that. I'm going to jump into power. Can I do that down here? Yeah. Okay. So triangle of power. This activity is really, really fun. It exists in different places on the internet. I've seen it play out in different YouTube kind of like educational tutorials. I've kind of adapted it in my own way. You ask students to now move. So say every session we sit in a circle. For this game, I asked 2 people to sit in a row facing the front, like facing the facilitator maybe, and then I ask 4 people to sit in a row behind them, 6 or 7 people to sit in a third row, and the majority of people, maybe 10 people, end up sitting at the back. So now we're in rows, and each row has more people in them as you move farther down the room. Then at the top of the room or at the front of the 2 people in the shortest row, I put a recycling bin or a garbage can. And then, so this is the numbers are reflecting how many people are in each row. Okay, so say this is your youth group, you set them up in this kind of in this shape. Then I give them either, we've used like paper from other activities, so maybe we have recycled paper that we crumple up in balls. And recently we've used bean bags. Bean bags are really great for this, like a small bean bag that you can throw. We use for this activity now. So each person gets a bean bag and they get a chance to throw their beanbag into the basket, the recycling bin or the garbage at the front. And as they go, each row by row, we notice that each row gets less in. And I actually record their scores on the board or on a piece of paper. And so you can see maybe 100% from the front row get their shots in, 60% from the second row get their shots in, 30% from the next row, and maybe one or no people from the back row get it in. Okay, so we play this. Maybe I play another round, similar things play out. I tell them they have to stay seated on their chairs. They can't turn around. They have to stay in their chair and their chair can't move. What ends up happening often is that the people in the front rows start to kind of like put their hands up and they get in the way and they block the people's shots from behind them, and they start to realize that they have some power in this game that the people behind them don't have. And so I don't tell them that they can do that, but I don't tell them they can't. And so they start to kind of realize that, oh, in the front, I have the ability to kind of do things that people in the back don't have, like maybe block their shot. And so then we have a discussion, and I kind of ask them if this reflects some of the ways that they see the world working around them. Is there ways that what's happening in this game also happens around us? And they will bring up things like privilege. The people in the front have more opportunities to succeed. So they'll probably identify, well, what does it mean to sink your basket? Well, it means success, right? I'm aiming for a goal. If I get it in, I'm successful. If I miss the basket, I'm unsuccessful. And you can ask them, what does it mean to be successful in like a Western society or like a capitalist society? What does it mean to be successful? And they'll start to identify, okay, people at the front are maybe wealthy people with privileges. They would maybe say things like whiteness would move you closer to the front. Being able-bodied, maybe being a man, maybe being rich, certain things that maybe would give you some benefits in this game or in the game of life. And so we would ask, who's maybe farthest from that basket, and they would maybe identify that race has something to play with the way that we're treated, or that, the people farther from the basket are houseless or in poverty. And so we can see that wealth is dividing us, and they maybe talk about things like class. A class society is segregating us. And so we can see that the way that the world is happening is not always fair. And so we get to talk about three different kinds of power. Power over, those that have power over us, maybe our teachers, maybe our parents, maybe people that have power over us that could protect us, can take care of us. They can use power to keep us healthy, keep us well. But people with power over could also be like the government or the police, and people that use power over us to harm us or could harm us. And then there's power with. So the people at the back, there's more of us. There's more, when we think about social movements and the power that people have together, we could challenge systems that have power over, systems that cause harm. We can challenge when we have power together. If we band together and we work together, we build healthy relationships together, we can challenge the people with power over. But a lot of that takes having power within, and the power within yourself to believe in yourself, to love yourself, to trust yourself, to build a relationship with somebody else in a healthy way means also having a healthy relationship with yourself. And so there's these three kinds of power that we show in the game, and then we get to reflect on after. And we get to kind of think about how this shows up in our day-to-day lives. Like they could reflect on how maybe things like class play out in their friendships. Like maybe I make fun of my friends because his shoes are ugly or old, or my family has a bigger house than him or nicer cars or things. And we kind of find the ways that maybe we pick on each other, and we use this idea of maybe being better than somebody else as a way of harming them. And we can even define bullying in this way, that bullying is targeted and repetitive attacking of somebody, but it's also about power, that I think I'm better than somebody. And if I feel I have power over, then that's maybe the first step in causing harm to that person. So how do we build healthy relationships given we kind of exist in this system of inequality? I asked them if they'd replay the game and make it more equal, how would they replay the game? How would they reset it up? And they often will come to a conclusion that we should just sit in a circle and the basket should be in the middle and we're all equal distance away and we can all have the same shot. So why not just set the game up like that? And we can think about what that would mean in like society if we had control to design society together, how we would make it more equal for each other. But then we also get to ask, is that the same as equity? And some students already know this, and they'll start to say, well, equity is actually different than equality. If equality is we all get the same, equity is we get what we need to succeed, and that's not always going to be the same. So especially in the game, if we're throwing a basket or if we're throwing something into a basket, if we're in school and some person has a disability and they're not able to throw the beanbag at the basket, then it's not a fair game, even if we're all sitting in the same distance away from the basket. So I have to adapt the game and maybe let that person go closer to the basket and create some maybe technology or something that allows them to participate in the game. So not everybody's going to need that. Some people will maybe have a really good throwing arm. They've practiced a lot. They maybe have a coach that's taught them how to throw. They can go farther away and still have the same opportunity of making their shot as someone that's much closer but doesn't have that privilege or that benefit. So then we start to think about what does it mean to give people what they need to succeed. And that doesn't necessarily mean equality, but it means adjusting and adapting where some people get some resources that other people don't need because they don't need them. And so again, they can reflect on how this shows up in their day-to-day lives. How can they build these ideas into their relationships where what our specific day-to-day relationships are like is also challenging things like racism, things like class, things like sexism, challenging the ways that maybe I have privileges that somebody else doesn't, or somebody else has privileges that I don't, and how we use those privileges or benefits to support each other and build relationship together, as opposed to having power over and just like enjoying my power over. Okay, so that's the power triangle. So this is the conversation about power, and this module also has a conversation about stereotypes. So this will bring us into a conversation of stereotypes when we ask them to define stereotypes and where they think stereotypes come from. And then we talk specifically about gender stereotypes. And I actually share a teaching from a Anishinaabe scholar that I really like. Her name is Leanne Simpson, Leanne Bedasamosake Simpson. She's Anishinaabe. She's a scholar. She talks a lot about gender and she talks about queerness. And she kind of gives this introduction to how we can think about including two-spirit in the way that we have a conversation about gender during this part of the module, because there's a pretty big, her name is Leanne Simpson. And this is also in the curriculum. You'll see her name and you can be able to find some of her work. Schools right now are really kind of having a hard time wrestling with the idea of gender and creating a space where students that are questioning their genders or students that are coming out as queer or trans can feel safe at school, where a lot of other students are kind of almost becoming more extremist in their views of being kind of anti-trans. And so I like to situate gender within us in the colonialism again. And I use Leanne Simpson's teachings because she talks about how before European settlers came here, there's lots of evidence of communities with many genders, or a diversity of gender and a variance of gender and variance of sexualities. And there's this, I skipped it actually by accident. I'm just going to go back quickly. This is by Awanagizek Bruce. His name is at the bottom. I've linked to this also in the document that I'm going to send after. This is from his Facebook page. He's also a scholar, and he's been doing research around Anishinaabe gender terms and language. And I share this in the school too, just to show them like a specific framework for how gender has existed outside of a binary in many communities around the world, but specifically on Turtle Island, where before colonialism, we have examples of gender systems that weren't binary, weren't just man and woman. And so I kind of invite them to be open-minded and kind of express themselves in a respectful way and understand that we're going to talk about gender stereotypes, but we need to make room for people who feel as though they don't identify with the gender they're assigned at birth. Because I'm in school, I also share resources from Judaism, and in the Talmud, in the Jewish traditional laws, there are 7 genders. I also share resources from South Asia, traditional Hindu teachings, and even Quranic teachings, where there are examples of multiple genders. And even in India right now, there is an official third gender identified as in the country in our protected group of people. So I share this so that students can have historical and cultural framework to understand gender outside of a binary. And then we can go in and talk about, let's unpack the stereotypes a bit. So I'm going to jump through this. So I'm going to show you this is the activity, what we do called the boxes. So I hand out sticky notes to everybody. And on their sticky note, I ask them, actually, I hand out 2 sticky notes to everybody, a pink one and a blue one. And I think it's good if you have different colored sticky notes. So I have pink sticky notes and blue sticky notes for the stereotypical boys and girls colors, right? And so I asked them to give me a few examples of stereotypes that they've maybe heard about girls or about women, and they'll name a few. Then I asked them to share some specific stereotypes they've heard about men or boys, and they'll name a few. And then I asked them on their sticky notes to keep going, and they'll write on their blue sticky note stereotypes that they've learned about boys. They'll say boys should be tough, boys should be strong, boys should be muscular, boys should be fighters, blah, 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 blah. Girls should be stay at home, take care of the kids, the stereotypes that maybe they've learned. And then they go up on the board and they put their sticky notes into two different boxes, the act like a girl box or the act like a woman box and the act like a man box. And I give them some ways of doing this. They can either put their sticky notes on a chair in the middle of the class, and then I'll put them on the board for them if they don't want to walk up and put their sticky notes on the board because it's maybe exposing their answers, even though it's anonymous. I also give them the chance to write on their sticky notes and just keep their sticky notes to themselves, and they don't have to put them on the board if they don't want to. So it's giving them options of participating and opting out if they don't want to. But this is kind of how a lot of their ideas show up. Excuse me. We end up actually having a ton of ideas. These are, as you can imagine, some of the most common answers that show up for the Act Like a Woman box. And we get to kind of see this together. What I do after all the sticky notes are on the board is half the circle goes up and reads the boxes like a gallery viewing. They go through, they read what everyone said, then they go sit down. Then the other half goes up, they read what's been put in the boxes, and they go sit down. These are some of the most common answers that show up in the Act Like a Man box. As we can probably predict, right? Um, the answers are almost always the same. They're super similar. They build very similar common discussions about it. It shows me the stereotypes are still very active. They're very real. Um, they're culturally specific, but again, this is kind of part of it is we're actually identifying stereotypes from like so-called dominant culture, Western society, or even whiteness. And students actually are really good at identifying this. So during the discussion, now we get to debrief the boxes. We get to discuss, what came up for you? What do you feel about these boxes? And a lot of times they feel saddened by it, especially the girls in the room are like, this box, I'm supposed to be weak and stay at home and I don't get to take care of myself or do things that I want. I'm not supposed to be athletic or, all these things. The boys sometimes really like their box. Like we're not gonna lie, a lot of times the boys like their box. They get to be a hero, they get to like sports, they get to be tough, they get to be the leader. So they're like, what's wrong with that? But some boys will definitely recognize that in the box means no crying, don't show your emotions, don't talk about being sad, don't admit that you're hurt, have power over other, be a fighter, do things like violence or crime. And so they'll start to identify some of the ways that the boxes are maybe harmful. I asked them where they learned them. They, will always talk about the media that this is something that they still see in movies and TV shows that maybe are enforced on us by our parents or teachers, other people in our lives. Um, this one comes up to a lot is, what if I like parts of my box? What if I'm a girl and I really like makeup and dresses and playing with dolls and I want to have kids? And, what if I'm a boy and I want to be strong and tough and I want to be a protector and I want to take care of my family and I want to be rich. I want to have a job and make lots of money. I think it's important that when we do this activity, we don't shame students for maybe the parts of the box that they really like, and that it's okay to identify with parts of your box and that's not the takeaway. The lesson is not to say if you are in your box, something is wrong with you or this is bad. The takeaway is that can we identify parts of the boxes that are harmful? And if we feel forced into our box, if we feel like we have no choice but to conform to my box, then maybe this box puts pressure on me that gives me a lot of anxiety or makes me not feel like I have a healthy relationship with myself or others. And then we can challenge to the ways that the box creates sexism, where we view the man box as strong and powerful, and we view the woman box as weak and soft and gentle and do what you're told, and how this creates a specific dynamic that leads to gender-based violence for girls and women. And we can kind of lean into that and hopefully get boys to acknowledge that there's ways that these gender stereotypes are not fair and give men power over. And then we have a responsibility to do something with that power. We also then can really reaffirm for boys that inside the box means don't talk about your feelings. don't admit that you're hurt. And that boys right now and older men too are really struggling with mental health and with depression and anxiety and suicidality and not being able to admit that they need support and that they need help. Even in looking at overdoses, even looking at workplace injuries or life expectancy, I think the stereotypes have a direct impact on men's health that we can also reaffirm for boys and reaffirming boys' pain and saying, it's okay that you're feeling pressure from these stereotypes and it's not all good for us. And so we get to challenge the boxes, and also say there's ways that it's okay to identify with your box. But we also have to understand that not everyone's going to fit in our box. Some people challenge our genders or question our genders, don't feel like we conform to the box at all. Maybe the box says, well, boys should like girls, girls should like boys. This creates homophobia, reasons to hurt each other and put each other down if we don't conform to the box. We bully each other if we don't fit in the box. And so I think there's ways of getting us to challenge that and think about how we challenge stereotypes, which bring us into healthy relationships with each other. And they will talk about race. They almost always bring up race, that these stereotypes feel very much like racism is telling us, especially around things like boys should have short hair. This comes up often for Indigenous boys in the groups, or for Sikh boys, for Punjabi boys, that having long hair is part of their culture, is part of their faith. So we can see that that wouldn't make sense for everybody, that men are supposed to have short hair. What does it mean to be attractive? Why are we supposed to look certain ways or fit into certain molds? Often come from the stereotypes that we see in movies where white people are the dominant image that we see as attractive. And so I think for a multiracial group, for a multi-cultural group, it's important that we talk about that. But I think it would come up in your sessions too if you're working only with Indigenous youth. It's important to situate the stereotypes within white supremacy, within white culture. And we talk a little bit about this, how this creates bullying and how this creates violence. And then we wrap up with how can I challenge these boxes safely? How can I challenge my friends if they say something, they recreate a stereotype? The easiest things that I say all the time is that's not cool. And if being in the box kind of is a reflection of me being cool, like if I'm in the box, I'm kind of more accepted. I'm a little bit more popular. I'm a little bit more like, cool with people. But if I can say, actually, that's not cool, that homophobic joke you made or that sexist joke you made, actually, that's not cool with me. I don't really like that. Then I could practice that with my friends. I can practice just not accepting something and saying, not maybe making a huge deal about it, like, well, I can't be friends with you anymore, but just, I'm not cool with that. I don't really want to talk like that anymore. And try and just kind of, get used to saying things like that. Okay. So I've said a lot already, and there's only 2 modules. So let me do module 3 really quickly, and I think we should do maybe breakout groups, and maybe you can already have a conversation and start to think about how maybe you're gonna adapt these things to your own communities and how maybe you'd bring some of the curriculum into your own spaces. So module 3 is about communication skills. The first 3 modules are my favorite, and if you only did the first 3 modules, I think we're covering so much information. I play a game, Whose Emotion Is It Anyways? I don't know if you're someone in my generation, I'm 34 years old. I don't know if you've watched Whose Line Is It Anyways, or a TV show that used to be Whose Line Is It Anyways? It's still on YouTube and stuff, but it's like an improv theater show. And I play a game kind of like improv theater with them. They get emotion wheels that look like this. Oh, wrong screen. They get emotion wheels that look like this. And it's just a bunch of different emotions on it. And they get to kind of read through that and reflect on emotions for a bit, what words they don't know. I help them define some of the words if they don't understand them. You might see that there's sexy on there under the joyful side. They always want me to define what it means to feel sexy. So if you're going to use this wheel, get prepared to answer that question. What does it mean to feel sexy? Um, but so then I play a game where I invite 2 of them, like 2 brave volunteers, want to volunteer for a theater game if they feel like doing improv with us. And I explain that 2 of them are going to come and sit in the middle of the circle. I give them chairs, and they're going to act out being 2 best friends at a cafe for lunch. Maybe that's a Saturday. They're coming to a cafe. They're going to sit down and have lunch together, and they get their emotion wheels like their menu. And I ask them on their emotion wheel to silently pick one of the emotions that they're going to use to act out the scene from. So they both choose an emotion and they only tell me what their emotion is. So maybe one chooses angry and one chooses sleepy. And then I give them a minute to act like they're friends at the cafe, sitting and hanging out and pretending to order something for lunch. But they have to act from that emotion. And then the rest of the circle gets to watch them do this really awkwardly and kind of funny and try to portray an emotion. And then I play the like the cafe barista or the restaurant server, and I take their order and I give them a minute to think about what they order, and then I come back and I pretend to give them food, and then we end the scene and we get the people on the outside of the circle to guess the emotions of the two characters and see if we can identify their emotions. So we're getting to see how good they are at acting out an emotion and how good we are as an audience of identifying the person's emotions that they act. And we can do a few rounds of that. It's usually pretty entertaining. And if you've built enough kind of like trust in the group, it can be really fun and it's really funny. So this whole module though is about building emotional intelligence. How good are we at understanding our emotions and other people's emotions? So we can call this emotional literacy, like learning how to understand emotion, emotional intelligence. I talk about, you've probably heard of IQ and this way of testing our intelligence. But that's really only our logic, our ability to solve problems. But we also have EQ, emotional intelligence. How good are we at understanding what people feel? How good am I at understanding what people are going through without even maybe speaking to them? Just by their body language, am I able to pick up on, people's energies? That's an emotional intelligence that we need to practice, that we need to learn. It's like a muscle. A lot of times we call it like emotional muscles. If I want my biceps to be bigger, I do specific exercises for my bicep. If I want my emotional intelligence to be better, I need to listen to people when they speak to me. I need to ask them about what they think or feel. If I feel my friend is sad, I maybe ask them, hey, it seems like you're feeling sad. Do you want to talk to me about it? If I'm feeling sad, I tell people what I'm feeling and I build that muscle. It gets better. If I never do those things, I don't talk about my feelings, I repress all my feelings, I push them down, I don't grow that muscle. And I end up kind of with an undeveloped emotional muscle. So in this class, we're going to practice it. And so then we get the emotion wheels, and the emotion wheel is an activity on its own where they partner up or they get in groups of three and they share a story with each other. I ask them, pick a short story, something that you've gone through recently. It could be super basic, really boring story. It could be something really exciting that's happened to you lately. It could be even something really challenging. I say, don't pick your most intense story. Don't pick, the story of something that's really awful that's happened to you, because we're not in a space where we can hold that well, or we're not in a space where we're going to be able to take care of each other. So pick a story that someone else could hear and it's not going to be too overwhelming. And so they share maybe 2-minute stories with each other. And the people that aren't telling the story, the listeners in the group of two or group of three, use the emotion wheel to try and identify the emotion that the storyteller is feeling from the story. And so the storyteller tells a story for 2 minutes, and then at the end, the listener says, "It sounds like you were feeling angry, or it feels like you were sound, or it sounds like you were feeling irritated." And then the storyteller gets to have their emotions reflected back to them, and they can say, "Oh yeah, I was feeling that," or "No, I wasn't quite feeling that way. I was feeling something else." And the listener can pick a few other emotions. Well, were you feeling, uh, you know, overjoyed that day? And so they can say, yeah, I was feeling that way. And then they switch. So the listener becomes the storyteller becomes the listener, and they get to use these emotion wheels as identifying each other's emotions through stories. And again, it's like practice. We can label this as like we're practicing our emotional muscles, where we're just hanging out, sharing stories with each other, and trying to identify emotions. So this brings us into a conversation about boundaries. Maybe in my story I felt angry, or maybe some of us in our stories we felt angry or scared or fearful, like maybe our boundaries have been crossed. And so we get to talk about boundaries. And during the boundaries conversation, I kind of talk about it like this. Boundaries are guidelines and limits that we have to keep ourselves safe and comfortable. And then I talk about three kinds of boundaries: space, talk, and touch. And again, I use sticky notes for this. I give them 3 sticky notes. They label them space, talk, and touch. And they reflect on, what space boundaries do I have? What talk boundaries do I have? What touch boundaries do I have? And I can say, okay, space boundaries are, what do you think space boundaries are? And they'll say, you're standing too close to me. My personal bubble, some people, students call it their no-no space. I heard that the other day, you're standing in my no-no space, which I thought was funny. But then we can also say, well, what else is your space? And they would maybe say their phone or their bedroom or the bathroom if they're in it. So space is also maybe like our clothing or things we have that I wouldn't just feel comfortable somebody coming up and touching or taking or reading my phone over my shoulder. So they get to reflect on what boundaries they have for space. Talk are things like how we use words to cross people's boundaries, ask questions that people are uncomfortable with, swear words or things like that. And touching is obviously unconsensual touching. Okay, so they get to reflect on those boundaries and write those things down on their sticky notes. And then we use these for doing another activity. So this now moves into an activity about assertiveness and accountability. And this is again like the conflict resolution now, working through what happens when my boundaries are crossed. And I think again, a very core part of our program. So I explain assertiveness as body language, that we think about what does it mean to have passive body language if my shoulders are shrugged and my head is down, my hands are in my pocket, right? If I look kind of like I have passive body language. I talk about aggressive body language. I roll up my sleeves, I clench my fists, I get in someone's face, I'm being aggressive. So assertive body language is standing up tall, being comfortable, calm, my hands are at my side, I make eye contact with people, and then I use I statements and I started to name my boundaries. So I'd say things like, I'm not comfortable when you call me names like that. I'm not comfortable when you make fun of my mom like that. So I name my boundary, and then I name an emotion. When you cross my boundary like that, I feel really angry with you. Or you're making me feel irritated. I'm kind of annoyed by you right now. I'm annoyed that you keep making these jokes about my mom. So I name my boundaries, I name my emotions, and I make requests. Can you not make that joke again anymore? Can you not make that joke in the future? So I explained to them kind of what assertiveness process is like. And if any of you have studied nonviolent communication, this is kind of like a nonviolent communication type of step. But we make it a little bit more less rigid than maybe the way that it's been taught before. So they don't have to follow step by step. They try to adapt it in their own language. Now, the accountability is, can you apologize if you are the one that's crossed someone's boundaries? If you are the one that has done something that someone else is not happy with, are you able to say, I'm sorry and that I shouldn't have done that? So the accountability is acknowledge the boundaries. I'm sorry I made that joke about you. I see that you're frustrated with me. I see that you're annoyed. I'm really sorry that I did that. I won't do it again. So committing to the request. So I walk them through the process. And then in small groups, in groups of 2 or 3 again, they use their sticky notes with their boundaries on them to pick a boundary and then role play this out with their partner or group of 3. So maybe on one of their sticky notes, they have, I don't like when you make fun of my body size, or like maybe like fat jokes would be on it, or sexist jokes, making fun of my gender or something. So they use a situation from their sticky notes to then role play being assertive to their a group of 2 or 3, and then one person in the group role plays apologizing, being accountable as though they were the one that said that joke that was offside. And so again, it's practice. Maybe it feels a bit clunky, it feels a bit awkward, but you name this as practice, right? We got to practice in this room, we practice the steps here, so then when it happens outside of the space, you're a little bit more comfortable. You're a little bit more ready. You're a little bit like you got the tools in your belt to say, okay, actually I can set my boundaries, or I can admit I did something wrong. I made someone uncomfortable and I can apologize for something. So that's the communication skills module. I feel like I've spoken so much, and we have 50 minutes left. So we've planned to give you breakout room times. I think we wanted to aim around 12 minutes to give you space in a smaller group to introduce yourselves to each other, maybe explain your community dynamics a bit, or how you maybe intend to use some of this material, how you would maybe adapt it to situate or to fit for you and the youth that you know, the youth that you work with, or how you might share this information with others. It's going to give you just a moment to kind of like reflect and talk about that together. And then we're going to come back. I'm going to share a little bit about like our main lessons, some of the challenges that we've gone through, and how some of the content maybe creates some challenges with youth, and how we've had to learn a few things. And then we'll also have time to answer some of your questions, because I know a lot of you have had questions coming up, and we want to kind of leave time to, at the end, maybe 15 minutes at least, to address your questions specifically. So we've gone through 3 modules. The rest are a little bit more simple, a little bit more straightforward. So I'll touch on those after the breakout rooms. As you can see, the other ones are basically social media, bystander intervention, and intoxication culture. where we talk about alcohol and marijuana a bit. So, Margot, I'm going to call upon you now, if that's okay, to help us move into breakout rooms, and we'll do 12 minutes, and then we're all going to come back together. All right.
I just want to say that if this is your first time doing this, you're a great presenter.
Thank you. Thank you. This is definitely the biggest and most presentation-based thing I've done.
Well,
Uh,
congratulations. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much. All right, I'll see you I'm going to jump into some of the breakout rooms.
So if everyone could go to their breakout room, that you should have a little sign on your monitor there. If you just click that and join the room and just share what you've learned and how you're going to use some of this material with the people that are in the breakout room. And then Ryan and myself and John Ann will come and join you and see if you have any questions or concerns.
Got kicked out.
You got kicked out?
Yeah.
I can get you back. I'm sorry, who was
Okay.
speaking?
Chastity.
Yes, I can definitely get you back in there. Let me take a look.
Me too.
On it. Sorry, it takes me a sec to look through all of the different names, but
No worries.
let's see. Just
Okay.
I'm going to join the breakout room. I'll be back.
sounds
I
good.
just got kicked out again.
I wonder.
Oh no. Let me try to re-sign you once more.
Can you make a new room, I wonder?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
Um,
Are we like in these groups? Are we just like introducing ourselves?
Yeah, I think that the goal of the breakout rooms is to give everyone a chance to talk about how they might want to modify and adapt this for their communities, and to sort of talk about what community context they are coming to this with. Also, Claudia and Patricia, I did see your requests, and I'm working on it, I swear. It takes me a sec. I have to filter through all of the names of these 300 people to get you into the right place, which is not the most convenient way to do things, hey? Did that request go through for you, Claudia? And Patricia, I think that hopefully went through on your end. Great. Yes, Laura, let me add you. Great. Elaine, do you know what room number you were in so I can make sure to add you back to the same one? That's a-okay. I will move you to room 13 since they're missing some, or sorry, room 3. So hopefully that's the right one. And if not, I hope they'll be very welcoming. And Krista, do you know what room you got kicked out of? Oh, Patricia, you're back again. Oh no. Let me take care of that for you.
Can I get added back to group 12?
Yes. Give me 1 second.
So there's a lot of people that are here in the main room. I wonder if are all of you here? Are you just is just your name there? Are folks here? Because maybe you could just use this as a group as well.
Yeah, we could definitely let some people chat in the main room. Also, Patricia, I did see your message about the box warning you about being recorded seems to prompt it. That might be asking you for confirmation about if you're okay being recorded. You might need to say yes. I do realize that I've
Okay. All right, we're back. Thanks everyone. I was able to visit two of the breakout rooms and just kind of check in on a few questions and just kind of see how things were going. It seemed like some of you were introducing each other and sharing a bit about yourselves, and then we had a space with a few questions, so that was good. I hope that was enough space. Maybe it wasn't that much time, but gave you just a chance to connect with each other and maybe connect with each other after this too. So I haven't really said
I'm
yet, but
hoping that we can create some sort of a network because we were passing around emails, but we couldn't get any, like, not everyone could share their emails. So
yeah.
it'd be so cool if we could get connected in some way where we could do some, some sharing. Thanks.
Yeah,
Yes.
we'll have some opportunity for that. We'll send out some information with the presentation and all of that of how we can stay connected afterwards and do some a follow-up session maybe in a month's time to see where folks are at.
Okay,
So
thank you.
you're welcome.
Yeah, that would be great.
Just a
Yeah.
quick note. Somebody was mentioning you guys did a conflict resolution seminar before.
Yes, we did. Yes, we have. We've done that before.
Are you able to share that recording, or is there any resources on that, or will you be hosting another?
We'll be hosting something similar. And we
Okay.
also, follow our Facebook page. We're going to be doing responding to Indigenous specific racism as well,
Okay.
too. So
Okay.
yeah, there's lots going on.
Sure. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, great questions. I think that's part of too where I was about to kind of say where I'm at with our project is starting to do more of these train the trainer type presentations and workshops with teachers and educators and youth workers and building some of our own network together and wanting to kind of stay in contact with folks after. So with Diana, but as well as with YWCA, we are intending to stay in contact with folks if you do have questions that you want to follow up with us about. Like Diana said too, in the future, maybe we have a time where we can all touch base again. You can share how things have been, what your challenges are, how we can brainstorm together. I think spaces like that are really important. I've been a part of that with our community of practice and the other organizations I work with, and we kind of want to recreate that in our own networks and the folks that we're connecting with here too. So that is part of our intention. It is part of our project goals. Okay, so really quickly, for about 15 minutes, I'm going to go through modules 4, 5, 6, and 7 really fast. They're a lot kind of more stripped down than the first 3. And then we're going to leave time to answer some more of your questions directly as a group. So thank you all for sticking with us and being here for this. I know it's kind of a longer stretch of time and you're at night, but it's really nice to be able to do this with you. Okay, so consent and social media is our 4th module. Consent is a really important topic, obviously. And when we first built the modules, consent was its own module. There was a whole class with activities just on consent. But it was kind of realizing that consent is in everything. Consent is something that should be interwoven into all of the topics and maybe doesn't need its own module, but shows up specifically at different times in different content. So we have it wrapped into social media and we have it wrapped into intoxication culture, which I'll get to. Consent is something I'm learning a lot about still too myself, and how educators are starting to talk about consent in schools. It's something maybe you're like me, like I never spoke about consent in school ever when I was in school as a teenager. I never knew what the word meant. I never had a class. I had one sexual health class in high school. That's it, nothing. And so now we're kind of at a place where like, oh, we need to talk to young people about this really badly. But there hasn't been a long history or like necessarily a lot of framework based or built around how to do consent education. And so there's been modules that have come out, or like models of consent education, that then people have kind of retracted and been like, oh, that's maybe not how we want to talk about consent. And so we're still kind of in that place. So I'm going to show you what I mean with a specific activity, actually. So wrapped into social media and consent culture, I actually have started playing a new game at the start of this module. Maybe you've seen it on the internet. It's kind of popular. Everyone sits in a circle and there's two teams. So the circle split in half. There's one team on one side and one team on the other, and there's a chair, like an empty chair in between the two teams. So it's like a horseshoe or a circle, and there's an empty chair in between the two sides. And so they act as two teams. On the empty chair is a water bottle. And the goal is to grab the water bottle for your team. And the two people sitting closest to the water bottle, it's their job to grab the water bottle. But they can't grab the water bottle until they're tapped on the foot by the person next to them. And so the way the game works is the tap starts with two people on the other side of the circle. They tap each other's, they tap the person's next to them foot. I'm not explaining this very well. There's a circle, two people start it, they tap the person next to them with their toe, and then the toe tap gets passed all the way around the circle to the end points where the person's next to the water bottle, and they have to grab the water bottle when they get tapped. So you sit in a circle, you tap the person next to you's foot, and the tap goes around the circle really quickly, and the person at the end gets tapped and grabs the water bottle. So it's kind of like a speed game, but it's also kind of like a network, right? You're sending like a message down the line, kind of like an internet maybe message would work. If you Google it, something like that, like a water bottle handshake pass, sometimes people do it squeezing hands. You hold hands and you squeeze each other's hands and you pass the squeeze. But I find schools and students don't always want to hold hands with each other. So tapping the foot, I feel like is better. It's more accessible. Okay, so that's a game I play. Also, that's pretty fun. I also give them computer trivia, and I ask them questions like when was Facebook created, and when was the first computer created, and when was the first cell phone created, and show them pictures of the first cell phone. And they get really tripped out about how old things are, and that they don't realize that the internet started like before they were alive. So it's kind of fun giving them some social media trivia. Three handshakes is also like an icebreaker game. You can ask them to turn to someone next to them and give their friend a high five or handshake. Don't talk about it, don't think about it, just give the person next to you a high five or handshake. And they'll just do something, right? Maybe some of them will like miss or not do a good one. They'll do like a weird, one person goes in for a pound, the other person goes for a handshake, and you do one of these weird things. And that's kind of the point. So then you say, okay, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to practice your handshake, to talk about it, to plan it out, to make it better. And so they have 30 seconds now to plan a handshake. They make it a little cooler, they do something kind of extra, and it gets better. But maybe still, so then you ask after 30 seconds, some of them want to demonstrate to the group what their handshake was. And some of them will perform their handshake for others. But they'll still not be that great. 30 seconds isn't that much time. Maybe they get confused about something and they mess it up. So then you say, okay, now I'm going to give you a minute. Now you have a minute to make your handshake better, smooth out all the kinks, maybe add a new dynamic, make it cooler, make it spicier, make it better. And so after a minute, now they've kind of come up with something a little bit better. They have a cooler handshake and they've made it smoother. And then you can explain, this is kind of like consent. Imagine we've just met somebody new. We're building a friendship. At what point do I feel comfortable hugging this person? Maybe we've hugged each other a bunch, and maybe I want to like wrap my legs around them in class when we're sitting next to each other. Or maybe I kind of like crush on somebody and I want to walk home with them after school. Maybe after walking home from school for a few weeks, maybe I want to kiss this person on the cheek goodbye. And so we can get them to reflect on these layers of intimacy as our relationships kind of level up in complexity. It takes more time. It takes more of a conversation to explain what we kind of want that interaction to be like. So with the high fives and the handshakes, the 1 minute time to talk and think about it gives us a better outcome. It gives us something, that we both feel better about. than the 30 seconds or when we haven't talked about it at all. And so we can think about how if our relationships are becoming more complex, our physical interactions with each other are becoming more complex, it takes more time, it takes a longer conversation to discuss how those things go. What do you feel good about? What do you not feel good about? So we call this 3 handshakes. I think it's really fun. It's usually like young people want to come up with fun, interesting handshakes, and there's that kind of takeaway message behind it. I get them to define consent, and this is actually a resource from somebody that I follow on Instagram. I'm going to actually get you to do this right now. So really quickly, maybe in the chat, you want to write a definition of consent, but you cannot use these words. Okay, so see these words in this box? Can you write out a short 1-sentence definition of consent, but don't use any of those words? I'll give you 1 minute to just see what you come up with. Consent is da 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 da, but don't use these words. This is a resource from Comprehensive Consent. Her name is Sarah. She's a consent educator. Her Instagram is really, really, really good. I'm going to link it in the document that I send out after this. I think she teaches consent in a way that really challenges maybe some of our initial ideas of consent. So consent is allowing, consent is permission. So we can't say permission. Consent is mandatory. Okay. You are allowed. Consent is telling a person that you like or dislike. Okay. Consent is making sure everyone is comfortable, respecting each other's boundaries. Oh, autonomy, respecting each other's autonomy. Good. Consent is respect. Consent is allowing, respect and self-respect actions. Okay, good. Mutual, I like that. Asking or showing enjoyment. Cool. You are not allowed to. Okay. Okay. Consent is respecting my wishes for my body. Good. Okay, so knowing your boundaries and others. Okay, nice. I like that one. Okay, so this is good because a lot of times our basic understanding of consent is permission. And if you ask most young people, what is consent? They're going to say consent means permission. It's like the same word. And a lot of young people now have been given this idea of consent that is very like contractual. It's a contract. And some of them even want to write down on a piece of paper, can you do this? Will you do this? And they want to sign it off like a document. And so what this educator talks about is, can we get to a place where consent is not just one moment? So consent is not just this transaction. I say what I want or need, you give me the answer, our transaction has happened, okay, good, I got consent, let's carry on with what we're doing. Yes, that's good. Like we should understand consent in that moment. But what this educator is talking about is consent culture. That consent is happening even before I've asked that question. Consent is, I think, what some of us are getting at is that mutual understanding of each other's boundaries. Consent is an alignment of each other's values, what keeps people safe and comfortable. It's being in touch with each other, being aware of each other's needs and dislikes and boundaries, I think is a really good way of putting it. So consent becomes a practice. It's something we're doing all the time. And I think that's really helpful for young people because young people are getting a lot of messages that consent is super important. And it very much is, but they're getting hyper focused on those little moments where they're in a romantic situation or a sexual interaction, and they really are focused on getting a clear yes. And that's good, but consent is so much bigger than that. It's such a bigger cultural thing we're always doing. And so we want to get into this place of how safe do other people feel around me? That's consent. Maybe it's not even safe or comfortable for me to ask a person. Like maybe even asking somebody for a hug or asking somebody for a kiss is putting them in a situation they're uncomfortable in. And so I didn't, beforehand even tune into that, where I got super focused on just, I got to ask this question, I got to get an answer. So it's getting youth to kind of reflect bigger. And we think about consent as like something we do every day all the time. It's not just in romantic situations. It's not just in sexual interactions. Consent is something we're practicing in the circle. We've set up boundaries. We set up expectations. Are you able to respect the expectations of the circle? Are you able to expect the space and the safety of everybody here? We're practicing consent when we're doing that. So it makes it bigger, and I think it makes it more important for them. So that educator I'll link to in the document, Sarah, she's really, really good at explaining that and kind of getting us away from this transaction. The consent is just this one little moment. So we then go into talking about cyber violence, how maybe we experience non-consensual interactions online. And we get them to name a bunch of different experiences that maybe cyber violence shows up in, like blackmailing and sextortion and cyberbullying and things like that. I don't have time to go into all those, but those are all in the curriculum. Then we get into talking about coping skills, like what emotions do people feel when we experience forms of violence? What emotions do we feel if we experience cyber violence? Again, drawing back to emotions and the emotional intelligence, building emotional awareness. And we ask about coping. And this is a really good chance for us to talk about harm reduction. I think harm reduction is super important, and it's giving students a space or young people a space to say, we have coping skills and coping mechanisms when we're stressed or we're anxious or we're depressed or we're dealing with things that we're overwhelmed about. And sometimes we don't choose the best thing. Sometimes we're not perfect. So we have skills that are more helpful than others, and I call them helpful coping skills and maybe less helpful coping skills. We could call them healthy and unhealthy, but sometimes I don't want to say like something that feels bad, like doing drugs or alcohol. When we use language like, well, that's bad for you, it kind of creates a system of shame, and students maybe start to feel like, oh, I'm a bad for choosing this, even though maybe, they're in a super hard situation, they're dealing with a lot, or they're already struggling with addiction. And so using drugs and alcohol isn't something we want to shame them about. We want to kind of try and get them to build healthier and more helpful practices of coping, but honoring the fact that sometimes we're not perfect, and sometimes we're in situations where we choose a coping strategy that actually is not helpful for us, like maybe drugs or alcohol, or maybe self-harm. And so students actually split into two groups. They build out either side of the list, helpful coping skills, long-term skills that we can use that are going to be sustainable and not hurt us. And then the less helpful ones, the ones that can kind of over time cause harm to us and maybe hurt us and actually are not good for us in the long run. And so we can use that language to kind of not stigmatize certain forms of coping and understand that we have some room for harm reduction. Maybe I'm not doing the most harmful thing for myself, but I'm choosing something that's still kind of harmful, but it's better than the most extreme. And so we create a pathway to the healthier side. We create a pathway to the more helpful ones. So we do coping, we do that like that. They build out either side and they put them on the board, or you can do this with sticky notes and they put them on the board and make like a T-chart. This is also in the curriculum. I talk about having social media breaks. I also talk about the psychology of conforming, and this is just a video I use, like a hidden camera show that I think is really interesting about how we conform to social pressure. You can talk a little bit about that, like how they feel social media pressures them to conform to ideas or follow trends, and if they've ever taken social media breaks, what do they feel when they have a break, or they've taken, they deleted an app or taken a break from social media, what comes up for them, create a space where they can talk about the anxiety that often they feel to always be online, to always be visible. Again, all that's in the curriculum. Okay, really quickly. I've linked to this video. We use a film for this module. It's a 17-minute film made by young people in the United States. It's from a school that's about a high school relationship that is unhealthy. It's an abusive relationship between a boyfriend and a girlfriend. In the document we'll send out after this, you can link to this. It is a paid resource. You do have to pay to access it. And there are, I think, limitations to it. For example, both the main characters are white. Both the main characters are straight. It's maybe like a representation that we see in the media very often, mainstream media, and won't represent everybody and maybe won't be relevant for the young people that you work with. And so I kind of give actually disclaimers about that when I show this to students and say, maybe this doesn't reflect your lives, but I don't have access right now to something better. And so because it is 17 minutes, it's pretty substantial. It shows us how an abusive relationship kind of goes through stages and moves through different forms of violence and a cycle of abuse. It gives us a way of seeing that through a film and then discussing questions about the red flags, the signs of abuse, the changes in behavior that someone goes through if they're experiencing violence. So we get to notice someone's emotional changes, how they isolate from people, or they feel stressed or overwhelmed. And so we get to kind of have a discussion about this film together. I hope maybe you can do research and find films or media that's more relevant for you. Crossing the Line, yes, it is pay to watch the film Crossing the Line. So I would maybe, and that this is part of our goals, is to just find more media and kind of do some more research online. I've linked to other films in the document I'll show you, or they're not films, they're very short videos made by the Youth Council in the community of practice that I'm a part of. They're really short animated clips. So those are maybe tools that you could use for a module like this. But I think finding like even a movie or something that kind of depicts an unhealthy relationship as a way of giving the youth like media to watch and then debrief the film and have a conversation about the forms of violence that we get to see. Okay. So we go in to have conversations about marijuana and alcohol. We talk about the truths and myths. I put up different truths and myths on different stations, and maybe there's 5 groups and they cycle through each station. They read the statements on the pieces of paper and they discuss as a group if they think it's true or false. And it's kind of like statistics or data about marijuana or about alcohol. These are in the curriculum. You can use the ones that we've used. You can come up with your own. I think vaping should be kind of included in this now, or other drugs could maybe be included in this. We only touch on alcohol and marijuana. And I actually don't do this module anymore because the schools I work in have other organizations come in and talk specifically about substances. So we found it just, we don't need to cover it in our program anymore. I will say, playing Spin the Bottle, I play a version of Spin the Bottle that youth really, really love. One, it's kind of like, ooh, we're playing Spin the Bottle. Like everybody knows that Spin the Bottle has like a certain allure to it. It's like it's been known as a kissing game or a truth or dare game. So I say, we're gonna play Spin the Bottle, and they're all like, what do you mean we're gonna play Spin the Bottle? But I say, okay, when the bottle lands on you, you have 3 options. You can tell us all something you do that intoxicates you. And I say intoxication has 2 different definitions. One, they obviously know drugs or alcohol intoxicates us. The other one, though, is that something that makes us so happy, so excited that we feel a little bit like out of our body. And I asked them for an example, like what's something that maybe you think intoxicates you that's not drugs or alcohol, like something that's really good for you. And sometimes they get to the idea of love. Like love is this like really can be this really intoxicating thing. So when the bottle lands on you, you can tell us all something you do that you love that makes you super happy. You can pass and say nothing, or you can read a love poem. And I bring actually a stack of love poems, and they can choose to read a poem in front of the group about love. And I think it's super cute. And by this time, like 6 visits together, or maybe this is like the 4th visit with the group, you'll get students kind of interesting and they'll encourage each other and they'll kind of like get somebody to read a poem about love. And even at the very least, they all just share things that they do that make them really happy and find ways that we, can feel good about our lives and feel good about things that aren't drugs or alcohol, things that intoxicate us. So Spin the Bottle version, I think it's really fun. Students really like it. I think it's a good way of like engaging with them. This is Consent is Like Fries. I don't think I'm going to talk about it. It's a tool about consent that's been very popular. That Sarah, that consent educator that I told you about earlier, she talks about that tool as something that we're moving away from, that we don't really want to use anymore. Consent is like fries. It's like a basic acronym. Consent is freely given. Consent is reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. She'll explain, if you go onto her Instagram and you watch some of her content, she has a bunch of content about why consent is like fries. This tool you'll see is maybe something that we want to kind of move past from and move more into idea of cultures of consent and like a big practice of consent than just a specific moment, which I've already talked about. Okay, bystander intervention. There's only 12 minutes left, so I kind of really want to leave time for questions. Bystander effect, we show a video, a what would you do video. There's a hidden camera TV show on YouTube called What Would You Do? They have a few episodes about like witnessing dating violence at a cafe between teenagers, and then you see adults and people intervene, and then we get to talk about the 5Ds. The 5Ds is also in our curriculum, but it's a resource from somebody else. I forget their name right now, but the 5Ds of bystander intervention are a really great tool to look at and maybe build into an activity and get them to think about the different ways we can do bystander intervention, not just direct, not just physical. There's all these different ways that we can get involved if we see somebody that's experiencing harassment or bullying. And then I give them scenarios, and then I ask them in the scenario, which of the 5Ds would they choose to respond in this scenario? Like, for example, you're standing in a circle of friends. Your friend gets a WhatsApp message from a group chat that he's in, and it's a nude picture of somebody at your school. What would you do? Which of the 5Ds of the bystander intervention tactics would you use to intervene in this moment? Would you say something directly? Would you delay and go talk to the person that was in the photo and try and get help for them? Would you document it? There's different ways that we could respond. So I give them different scenarios, and these are all in the curriculum. Okay. We did a wrap up too, like a review with them and give them a time to build a safety code for themselves, honor the work that they've done, give them a lot of celebration and like respect for all this work. I think that's an important thing to do too. 10 minutes left. So I think there's a bunch of our big lessons that I wanted to talk about, but I think you can maybe imagine what some of our lessons have been, and I want to leave room for your talks. Rhymes for Young Ghouls is a great film. Yeah. I want to leave time to answer some questions. So, and maybe I'll talk about lessons in another time when we get to visit, but maybe John Nan or Diana or Margot could read a question. I haven't been able to follow the chat. So if there are maybe repetitive questions that have come up, or if people have sent direct messages to you.
I have a few questions. I've been answering a lot of questions throughout the presentation, but I have a few that I was able to pull out that are questions for you. So one question was, do you put out a hat or some way for students to be able to ask anonymous questions to you?
I wish I did. I need to. It's come up many times. And actually our grade 7s program do it. And I have it on notes all over the place to have a question box. And I haven't done it yet. I think you should. I should. I need to do that. I need to be accountable, and I need to build a box that people can put anonymous questions in and like answer them at the next session together. Or I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Another question is, so you were talking about the emotion wheel and you talked about sexy. So one question is, what if sexy is seen as negative in acting out the emotion wheel game?
Like it's bad to feel sexy. Yeah. Like maybe like creating shame around the idea of feeling sexy or being sexy. The way that I explain when students ask me like what does sexy feel like, and I'm always like I kind of maybe get flushed or I get like nervous or something to say. I always think about it. I try and like take it out of maybe like a sexual content because I'm working with students. I say, have you ever like really feeling yourself, like you're wearing something that you really like, or you feel like you're looking good that day. Maybe you've taken a selfie, or you're in the mirror and you're feeling confident, you feel good about yourself, and you're just like, you know what, I got this. Like maybe that's what it feels like to be sexy, Maybe I would say if you've had a crush on somebody and maybe you're kind of like flirting with somebody, or they've given you compliments and you feel good about yourself and you feel kind of like, a little bit excited, that's how I'd explain what it means to be sexy. So maybe that would kind of like dispel the idea that it's bad to feel sexy and kind of take it out of like a hypersexualized content and more into just like a place of feeling self-confident and feeling good about yourself. I don't know if that answers your question. That's maybe how I would approach it. Yeah, confident and flirty. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. There was a question, I think this was when you were talking about like nonviolent communication. There was a question of, could you give an example of what a request would be?
A request. Oh, like say I don't like when you comment about my body. So I could say maybe, what, those jokes that you've been making about like me gaining a bit of weight, you know what, I really don't like it. That's kind of a boundary for me. Can we not comment on each other's bodies? So there's the request. Can we not comment on each other's bodies? And so within setting my boundary and kind of naming what it feels for me, I asked something. I could even say things like, you know what, I need a bit of space from you. I'm feeling a little bit anxious when I'm around you. I'm a little bit annoyed with you right now. I need like 2 or 3 days to just like have a bit of space. Can we touch base again on Friday? And I give like a time, maybe my request is a time frame. Those can be good requests too. Hey, I'm really overwhelmed. I need 5 minutes. Can you give me 5 minutes? And then I'll have more emotional energy to like have this conversation with you. So requests are either, don't make these comments anymore, or can you stop this activity or this behavior that you're doing? Or can you give me like a time frame of some space? Could be requests.
Okay, great. And then at the beginning, there was a question about your work with the men's club. If you could speak a bit more about that.
Yeah. So that group is called Dudes Club Society, and they have a youth program called Next Up, NEXUP. And they're an initiative here in so-called Vancouver, but they are kind of spread across Turtle Island and try to support communities in different capacities. They could be an organization that maybe helps you with fund development or helps you with self-care packages. They could be an organization that helps you come up with activities and things to engage boys and men. They could kind of link you up with knowledge keepers or elders that they maybe are in connection to that could help you kind of build resources for young boys and men and kind of specifically take that lens that, you know, patriarchal masculinity is harmful towards men and white supremacy, settler colonial capitalism is harmful towards men in the ways that it enforces harmful ideas of masculinity. And so specifically working with boys and men in that capacity is health in their own way and is also ending, like helping to end gender-based violence, is helping to address domestic violence. And so it's kind of that two-prong approach that building capacity for men's health is also creating, you know, safer families and safer relationships. I could talk more about that, but I'm not sure if that was the question.
No, I think that is good. And I see Carla has a hand up. Please go ahead, Carla.
Thank you. I couldn't type it in the chat. I just wanted to get it's called Dude Club Society, and the group was Next Up.
Yeah, next up without the T. So NEXUP.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah,
Okay, so
and
my question was I think it was in the beginning of the module, the first one, when you were talking about the icebreaker when we were they were doing the sticky notes pink and blue, and there was a lot of really good things that could have been put in there that you were mentioning. My question is, if a lot of those ones that we are not in there, for example, the short hair and things like that, certain prompts that we want to get the conversation going, would it be recommended that we could possibly have some that we're trying to engage in and just kind of throw those in there?
I think
Do they
so.
have to come from the group?
No, I think it's good to encourage them to go in certain directions if you feel like they're maybe missing some of those important points. I kind of take the approach to, like I said it from the start, is like I'm there to facilitate, and I do acknowledge that I have a power in the space. I'm an adult, I'm maybe being paid to be here. I do have a power, but as much as I can, I try and bring myself down to their level too and participate also in the activities. So I'm also filling out sticky notes and I'm also playing the games. And I'm also kind of partially just a participant in the game that's giving my own ideas based on my experiences. So I'm also role playing, being vulnerable and being honest about my feelings. And I say they can disagree with me too. Like there's times when we can openly disagree with each other. And so that's I think part of it. I think that's important to build in.
Great, yeah, because I think it's sometimes people might be less inclined to engage, or I think it's good for us to be able to guide them to keep the conversations going.
Yeah, definitely. I one of the guidelines that usually comes up, like the community agreements, is to speak from your own experiences. And so say things like, this is what I think, or, you know, this is maybe what I believe, or just kind of instead of like big blanket statements or this is how it is kind of things. I really try and just say like, well, this is what I think, and give them chances to see how that feels for them. And then they can say things, well, like, this is what I think. And then it's a sharing of ideas.
Great, thank you.
So there's about a minute and a half, and then I don't want to take more time than we've allotted. So
those were all the questions that I had that I saw. If I missed anyone's questions, I apologize. I was trying to answer as much of them as I could.
Any tips for when this is over Zoom? I can see. When we did Zoom or when we did online, we weren't able to do live Zoom calls because of the logistics of working with schools and the timing of having students tune in live at a certain time. So we actually had to record videos and we had videos of me basically going through prezzies like this that they watched on YouTube, and then they answered reflection questions. I don't think that's a very good model. If you can do it on live, I think Google Jamboard is still working. I think there's been talk that Google Jamboard is going to go down, but an online, I think even Zoom has the option for a whiteboard. Yeah, I can do a whiteboard. I don't know if it's going to work right now, but using an online whiteboard, I think is helpful too. And you can draw and you can have students participate within like a collective space. Yeah, I opened it actually. So yeah,
Thank you.
so setting up good protocol for that was important so people don't start drawing inappropriate things.
Uh-oh.
All right. Okay, I think maybe that's all for me. I really want to appreciate and give my gratitude to all of you. I really, really appreciate you spending this time. It's such an honor to be invited into this space. I hope I represented our work well, and I know that a lot of people have been involved in this project, and a lot of people support me and bring their expertise into this work that I do. And it's not just me. It's not just me by myself. So I do want to honor and respect and thank John Nan and my team at YWCA and all the other folks that I'm just in community with that are constantly informing my work and keeping me accountable, and including you. So any feedback in the ways that you want to kind of interact with us in the future, I'm very open to, and I'm always constantly learning. So thank you so much. Diana, maybe leave it with you.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
thank you, Ryan, for this excellent presentation. Lots of wonderful comments from folks about all the information that was shared tonight, and lots of excitement around delivering sessions. People are talking about that and how they're looking forward to making that happen. So we will send out the information to you next week. All of the material from today, the recording and an evaluation and some resources that Ryan has put together for you. So that will be good. And I'm thinking about having another session in about a month's time to see where folks are at. I want to give you some time to review all the material and the curriculum and see what you might have planned for the coming months, and we're wanting to have a session ourselves here, so we'll be doing that. I think we haven't set a date yet, but it'll be happening in February. Yeah, and so we can invite all of you to that. You can see how we do it, how it's done, and hopefully, yeah, we'll be able to meet again and share your successes and also your questions and your comments about how the session went for you. And we can have Ryan with us, and he can help to give some tips on things obstacles or things that you might have around the curriculum and other stuff. So we'll give you a good month to review all of the material and see how that goes, and we'll be setting up our session as well too in the meantime. So you can check that out too. We're having a few different things coming up in the coming weeks. One is cultivating safe spaces. We're having that coming up, and I was hoping to get a link into the chat there for folks to be able to register for that. It's going to be an excellent session. It's a presentation. It's going to be on a Saturday, the 27th, I think it is, the last Saturday of the month. We're also doing Power Zumba. We're going to be starting Power Zumba happening with Maddie McCollum, and it's going to be on Zoom as well, too. So that's going to happen on Saturday mornings, starting the 20th at 9 o'clock Pacific time. So that'll be middle day for those of you who are back east. And we're in yoga. So we have our yoga happening as well, too. And yoga's on Tuesday nights. And our drum circle. Our drum circle's on Wednesday night. So we'll be doing our drum circle, and we do performances as well too. So those of you who are in Vancouver, yeah, come and learn our songs, and you can sing with us when we have our performances happening. Yeah, so that's weekly drum circle starting on Wednesday nights. So we had one last night, and we'll be doing that for every Wednesday until the end of March at least. Yeah, a whole bunch of other stuff going on as well too. So we're going to be doing some more lateral kindness and responding to Indigenous specific racism and more around conflict resolution. Yeah, and some other good things happening. So thank you so much for spending your evening with us from your homelands, and I look forward to hearing from you about the sessions that you're planning to have in your community. Let us know if you like this session too. Please give us a review on Facebook. We've just got over 1,600 followers now, so we're really hoping to build up our Facebook profile. We just celebrated our 1 year in December, and yeah, very excited to see what the new year holds in store for us. So thank you again. Thank you, Ryan, for all the work that you do and for all the information that you shared with us. We really appreciate that. It was really good. Thank you to John Ann for being here and helping with the questions, and thanks to Margot as well too for helping with the breakout rooms and all of that. Really appreciate all the support that you provide for Indigenous Women Rise Society. So like and follow us on Facebook, and we'll see you when we see you. Now at go, we say, now at go, and we say nagitwa in Oneida. We don't say goodbye, we say until we see you again. So if everyone can turn on your cameras, and if we can turn your microphones on and say goodbye in your language, or
We'll say mamapi, mamapi. Hi,
Mona.
Hi, merci
Bye.
on relation.
Bamapi.
Okay, with Jimna Ginkta.
I don't actually know the language yet, so I just say in English. Bye.
À la prochaine.
Thank you. Thank
I'm
you.
gonna get.
So nice. Okay.
Thank you so much, Diana. Thanks,
Yes.
everybody.
You.